My name is Eliana Carter. I'm 41 years old. 10 years ago, my family didn't just abandon me. They didn't just cut me off. They erased me. They removed every photograph of me from the family home. They struck my name from the family trust. They told our relatives I was a drug addict and a thief, and they convinced everyone in our circle that I had stolen $200,000 from my own mother's personal account. None of it was true, not a single word. But by the time the dust settled, I had lost my inheritance, my reputation, my home, and every person I had ever called family. I was 29 years old, sleeping in a studio apartment above a laundromat in Trenton, New Jersey, with $1,100 to my name and a suitcase of clothes that smelled like fabric softener and mildew. And the person who orchestrated all of it? My younger brother, Marcus, the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who smiled at me across the dinner table every Thanksgiving while quietly, methodically stealing my entire life out from under me. But here's the part that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. 10 years later, after I had rebuilt everything from nothing, after I had clawed my way back from the bottom of a hole so deep I couldn't see daylight, my family walked into the lobby of my company. My mother, my father, and Marcus. They weren't there to apologize. They were there to demand 70% of everything I had built. And what I did next? Well, that's the story I need to tell you. Before I get into everything that happened, I want to ask you something. If you've ever been betrayed by someone you loved, someone you trusted completely, hit that like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And stay with me, because this story has an ending that I still can't believe actually happened in my own life. Let me take you back to the beginning, because you need to understand the family I grew up in, to understand how something this cruel was even possible. The Carters were, by all outward appearances, a successful upper-middle-class family in Montclair, New Jersey. My father, Raymond Carter, owned a chain of 4 luxury car dealerships across northern New Jersey and Staten Island, combined annual revenue of about $12 million. My mother, Denise, was a former corporate attorney who had retired early to manage the family's real estate portfolio, 7 rental properties, a vacation home in the Poconos, and the family estate, a 5-bedroom colonial on a tree-lined street that my parents had purchased for $380,000 in 1994, and that was worth well over $1 million by the time I was in college. On paper, we had everything: the cars, the vacations, the private school tuition, the country club membership, the annual holiday party where my mother wore Chanel and my father shook hands with local politicians like they were old friends. But behind that front door, there was a hierarchy in the Carter household that was as rigid and as cruel as any caste system. And at the top of that hierarchy, always, unfailingly, without exception, was my younger brother Marcus. Marcus was born 2 years after me, and from the moment he arrived, something shifted in my parents' eyes. I don't know how else to describe it. It was like someone had dimmed a light in the room where I stood and turned a spotlight on him. Marcus was charming, I'll give him that. He had this easy, natural charisma that made adults laugh and made other kids want to be around him. He played basketball in high school. Not exceptionally well, but well enough to make varsity. He told jokes at dinner. He knew how to compliment my mother's cooking in a way that made her beam. He knew how to ask my father about the dealerships in a way that made my father feel respected. And me? I was the quiet one, the serious one, the daughter who read books at family gatherings instead of working the room, the girl who got straight A's but never got the reaction that Marcus got for a B+, the one who was always told to help in the kitchen while Marcus sat at the table with my father talking about the future of the business. I want to give you some specific moments because the details matter. The details are what made me understand, years later, that what I experienced wasn't just favoritism. It was systematic emotional neglect. And honestly, as a daughter in that house, it cut even deeper, because I wasn't just overlooked, I was dismissed as irrelevant. When I turned 16, I asked my parents for a used car. Nothing fancy. I had been saving money from my part-time job at a bookstore, and I had about $2,400 set aside. I told my father I'd found a 2001 Honda Civic with 90,000 miles for $4,800, and I asked if he would match what I had saved so I could buy it. My father looked at me over the top of his glasses and said, "Eliana, you don't need a car. You can take the bus. or get a ride with a friend. Girls your age don't need to be driving around alone anyway. I accepted it. I didn't argue. I took the bus. 7 months later, Marcus turned 14. Not 16, 14. He couldn't even legally drive yet. And on his birthday, my father pulled a tarp off a brand new jet black BMW 3 Series sitting in the driveway. Not used. New. A $42,000 car for a 14-year-old boy who wouldn't have a license for 2 more years. "We'll keep it in the garage until you're ready, son," my father said, grinning like he was handing his boy the keys to the kingdom. Marcus hugged him. My mother took photographs. I stood on the porch holding a paper plate with a slice of cake I no longer wanted to eat. Nobody looked at me. Nobody thought to explain. Nobody even noticed I had gone quiet. When I was accepted to Rutgers University, I was thrilled. I had worked hard, maintained a 3.9 gigapascals, and earned a partial academic scholarship that covered about 40% of tuition. I assumed my parents would cover the rest. After all, they had always talked about the college funds they had set up for both of us when we were born. The week before classes started, I sat down with my mother to discuss finances. She slid a folder across the kitchen table. "Your college fund has $14,000 in it," she said. I stared at her. 14,000? Dad said he'd been putting money in since I was a baby. She shrugged. "Things came up. The dealerships had a rough patch a few years ago. We had to reallocate." "Reallocate where?" She didn't answer. I found out 2 years later, almost by accident, that Marcus's college fund had $120,000 in it. My mother had redirected contributions from my fund to his when I was 11 years old. For 5 years, every dollar that was supposed to go toward my future had been quietly funneled into my brother's account. I confronted my mother about it. She looked at me with genuine confusion and said, "Marcus has different needs. Eliana, he's the one who's going to carry the family name. He's going to need more support. You'll get married someday. Your husband will take care of things. You've always been independent. You'll figure it out. I'll figure it out." That became the family motto for dealing with me. Whenever something was unfair, whenever something was taken from me, whenever I was pushed aside so Marcus could have more, the answer was always the same. Eliana will figure it out. I was 22, freshly graduated from Rutgers with a degree in computer science, working my first real job as a junior software developer at a small tech firm in Newark. I was proud of myself. I was making $58,000 a year, paying my own rent, and I had just finished paying off $32,000 in student loans that my parents had refused to help with. At Thanksgiving dinner that year, my father raised a glass and announced that Marcus, who was 20, had dropped out of community college after 1 semester and had been living at home rent-free, was going to be given a management position at the flagship dealership. "Marcus has a natural talent for business," my father said. "He understands people. He's going to take this company to the next level." My Aunt Patricia, my father's sister, turned to me. "What about Eliana? She just graduated top of her class. Doesn't she want to be part of the family business?" The table went quiet. My father looked at me for a long moment, then said, "Eliana chose her own path. We respect that. Besides, the dealership world isn't really a place for a young woman. It's a tough environment." It was the way he said it, like I had committed an act of betrayal by becoming educated, like my success was an inconvenience, like my gender disqualified me from the family legacy, regardless of how hard I worked or how much I achieved. Marcus smiled at me from across the table. Not a warm smile, a knowing smile. The smile of someone who understood exactly what was happening and enjoyed it. My mother patted my hand and said, "You should focus on finding a nice young man, sweetheart. You're getting to that age." I was 22. I had a degree in computer science. I had just paid off my own student loans, and my mother's advice was to find a husband. If you're watching this and you've ever felt invisible in your own family, like you could achieve everything and it still wouldn't be enough, like being a daughter somehow made you worth less, drop a comment below. Tell me your story, because I need you to know. You're not crazy. It's real, and it's not your fault. For the next 7 years, I kept my distance. I built my career. I moved from junior developer to senior developer, then to lead engineer at a growing fintech startup. By 2016, I was earning $140,000 a year. I had savings. I had investments. I had a quiet, dignified life that I had constructed entirely on my own. But I still loved my family. That's the part that's hard to explain to people who haven't lived it. Despite everything, the favoritism, the financial neglect, the emotional dismissal, the constant message that my brother mattered more because he was the son, I still showed up. I still called my mother on Sundays. I still sent birthday cards. I still went to Christmas dinner and sat in the chair closest to the kitchen, the one nobody else wanted. I still helped clear the table while Marcus sat in the living room with my father watching football. Because I kept hoping. I kept thinking, maybe this year they'll see me. Maybe this year they'll acknowledge what I've built. Maybe this year, my father will look at me the way he looks at Marcus and say, "I'm proud of you, Eliana." He never did. In early 2017, my mother called me. Her voice was different, softer, almost fragile. "Eliana, your grandfather passed away." My grandfather, my mother's father, Theodore Williams, had been a quiet, dignified man who had built a small real estate empire in Essex County over 50 years. He owned commercial properties, apartment buildings, and a beautiful lakefront home in Lake Hopatcong that I had spent summers at as a child. He was the only person in my family who had ever made me feel seen. He used to sit with me on the dock, just the two of us, and say, "Eliana, you remind me of myself when I was young. You've got fire in you. Don't let anyone put it out." And in his will, he left me $500,000, $500,000, to me, specifically to me. The will was explicit. To my granddaughter, Eliana Denise Carter, I leave the sum of $500,000 to be used for the advancement of her career and personal well-being, in recognition of her determination, her character, and her refusal to be diminished by circumstances beyond her control. He had seen me. Even when no one else did, my grandfather had seen me. Marcus received $50,000. My mother received the lakefront property and a portfolio of rental income. But the cash, the largest single bequest, went to me. And that's when everything fell apart. My mother called me the day after the will was read. She wasn't soft anymore. "Eliana, we need to talk about your grandfather's estate. That money should be split equally between you and Marcus. It's only fair. Grandpa specifically left it to me, Mom. Your grandfather was old and confused. Marcus needs that money more than you do. He's trying to get the dealership expansion off the ground. He has real responsibilities. He's building something. And what am I doing, Mom? What do you think I've been doing for the last 7 years?" "That's different, Eliana. You have a job. Marcus has a business, a family business. It's not the same. That's not my responsibility. So you're just going to be selfish after everything this family has done for you?" I almost laughed. Almost. What exactly has this family done for me, Mom? She hung up. 3 weeks later, I received a certified letter from an attorney. My parents and Marcus were contesting my grandfather's will. They claimed he had been suffering from cognitive decline and that the bequest to me was the result of undue influence. Specifically, they alleged that I had manipulated my elderly grandfather into leaving me a disproportionate share of his estate. They wanted the $500,000 redistributed equally among all family members. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part came 2 months later when I discovered that $200,000 had been withdrawn from my mother's personal savings account. An account that, years earlier, she had added my name to as a co-signer for emergencies. I had never touched that account. I had forgotten it even existed. Marcus had withdrawn the money, but because my name was on the account, he told my mother, and then told everyone in our family, our church, our community, that I had stolen it. He forged a paper trail. He created fake email correspondence. He doctored screenshots of text messages to make it look like I had been pressuring my mother for money. He even went to the police and filed a report in my mother's name. And you know what made it so easy for people to believe? Because I was the daughter. Because I was the one who wasn't supposed to want money. Because in my family's world, a woman wanting financial independence was already suspicious. A woman receiving a large inheritance over a son was already wrong. Marcus barely had to try. The narrative wrote itself. The ungrateful daughter stole from her own mother. I was 29 years old, and overnight, I became a thief in the eyes of everyone I had ever known. My father called me one final time. "Don't come back to this house. Don't call your mother. As far as I'm concerned, I have one child." The line went dead. I sat on the floor of my apartment and stared at the wall for 3 hours. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there, trying to understand how the people who were supposed to love me had become the people most committed to destroying me. The will contest froze my grandfather's bequest. The police investigation, which ultimately went nowhere because there was no actual evidence of theft, because I hadn't stolen anything, destroyed my professional reputation. My employer at the time received an anonymous tip that I was under investigation for financial fraud. I was placed on administrative leave and eventually let go. In the space of 4 months, I lost my inheritance, my job, my family, and my name. I moved to a studio apartment in Trenton, $1,100 in my checking account, a suitcase of clothes, a laptop, and a silence so complete it felt like the world had swallowed me whole. I want to pause here and ask you something honestly. What would you have done? If your entire family turned against you, if the people who were supposed to protect you became the ones trying to destroy you, would you have given up? Would you have fought? Tell me in the comments, because what I did next surprised even me. Her name was Dr. Priya Anand. She was a professor of computer science at Princeton, who I had met at a tech conference 2 years earlier. We had exchanged emails occasionally, mostly about machine learning research, but we weren't close. When I lost my job, I sent her a message, not asking for help, just telling her what had happened. I don't know why. Maybe I needed someone, anyone, to know the truth. Maybe I needed one person in the world to hear my side. She called me within an hour. "Eliana, I've read your work. I know the kind of person you are. People who write code the way you do don't steal from their mothers. Come to Princeton. I have a research position open, and I need someone with your skills." The position paid $45,000 a year, less than a third of what I had been making. But it came with access to Princeton's research facilities, mentorship from one of the most brilliant minds in the field, and something I hadn't felt in months. Someone who believed in me. Another woman who looked at my work and saw my value, not my gender. I took it. For 3 years, I worked 18-hour days. I published research, I developed algorithms. I lived on rice and vegetables and black coffee, and I poured every ounce of pain, every drop of humiliation, every sleepless night into my work. There were nights I cried in my car in the parking lot after everyone else had gone home. There were mornings I woke up and had to convince myself to get out of bed. But I did. Every single day I did. And then, in 2020, during the pandemic, something happened. I had developed a proprietary AI-driven supply chain optimization platform, technology that could reduce logistics costs for mid-size companies by up to 35%. Dr. Anand connected me with a venture capital firm. They saw a demo. They saw the numbers. They offered me $4.2 million in seed funding. I founded Carter Logistics Intelligence, CLI, in a one-room office in Princeton, New Jersey, with 3 employees and a second-hand espresso machine. Within 2 years, CLI had 47 employees. Within 3 years, we were operating in 12 states. By 2026, CLI had a valuation of $38 million, annual revenue of $11.5 million, and contracts with 3 Fortune 500 companies. I bought a house, not a mansion. A beautiful 4-bedroom Craftsman in Princeton, with a garden and a porch where I drank my coffee every morning and reminded myself that every brick of this life had been laid by my own hands. The hands my family said would be best used clearing dinner plates and finding a husband. I started a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name for first-generation college students, with a special focus on young women in STEM. I donated to youth coding programs in Newark and Trenton. I mentored girls who reminded me of who I was at 16. Standing on a porch with a paper plate, watching someone else get everything while being told to figure it out. I built a life that was mine, not because my family gave it to me, but because they didn't. And here's where I need you to stay with me, because what happened next is the reason I'm telling this story. If you're still watching, hit that subscribe button and buckle in. Because the Carters were about to come back. It was a Tuesday afternoon in March 2027. I was in my office on the third floor of CLI's new headquarters, a renovated industrial building in downtown Princeton that we had moved into 6 months earlier. I was reviewing a contract proposal when my assistant, David, knocked on my door. "Eliana, there are 3 people in the lobby who say they're your family. They don't have an appointment, but they're insisting on seeing you." My blood went cold. Who specifically? A man and a woman in their late 60s, and a younger man, maybe late 30s. They say their last name is Carter. I closed my laptop. I sat very still for a long moment. Then I said, "Send them to conference room B. I'll be down in 10 minutes. I used those 10 minutes to call my attorney, Diane Holbrook, and ask her to come to the office immediately. Then I called Dr. Anand because I needed to hear her voice. She answered on the second ring. "They're here, Priya." I knew this would happen eventually. "You're ready, Eliana. You've been ready for years." I checked my reflection in the glass door before I went downstairs. Not out of vanity. I needed to see myself. I needed to remind myself that the woman looking back at me was not the girl who stood on that porch. I was the CEO of a $38 million company. I had earned every square inch of this building, and nobody was going to make me feel small in my own house ever again. I walked into conference room B at 2:47 in the afternoon. My mother was sitting at the far end of the table. She looked older. Her hair was gray now, and her shoulders had a stoop I didn't remember. My father sat beside her, his jaw set in that familiar expression of authority that had once terrified me. And Marcus sat across from them, wearing a suit that was slightly too tight and a watch that was slightly too expensive. Nobody stood when I entered. Nobody hugged me. Nobody said we're sorry. My father spoke first. "Eliana, you've done well for yourself." "Yes. We've been following your company. Impressive numbers." "Thank you." He leaned forward. "We're here because we believe there's an opportunity for the family to be involved in what you've built." Marcus has significant experience in business operations, from running the dealerships. Your mother has legal and real estate expertise, and I have 40 years of business ownership under my belt. I waited. "We're proposing a family partnership," my father continued. "We would take a 70% equity stake in CLI in exchange for our combined expertise, our business network, and the Carter family name. You would retain 30% and continue in an operational role." The room was silent. "Let me make sure you understand what just happened. My family, the people who stole my inheritance, framed me for theft, destroyed my reputation, and disowned me for 10 years, walked into my company and asked for 70% of a $38 million business. They wanted $26.6 million in equity. For nothing." I looked at Marcus. He was smiling. That same smile from Thanksgiving dinner 18 years ago. That knowing, comfortable, entitled smile. The smile of a man who had spent his whole life getting everything handed to him and genuinely believed the world owed him more. "And if I decline?" I asked quietly. My father's expression hardened. "Eliana, family is family. We're offering you a chance to come back into the fold. Don't be difficult." Don't be difficult. 3 words that had followed me my entire life. Don't be difficult, Eliana. Don't ask questions. Don't want things. Don't take up space. Don't be difficult. "What happened to the dealerships?" I asked. The silence that followed told me everything. Marcus shifted in his seat. My mother looked down at her hands. "The dealerships filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy 8 months ago," my father said, his voice tight. "Marcus made some investment decisions that didn't pan out. We've lost 3 of the 4 locations. The family home is leveraged. Your mother's rental properties have been sold to cover debts. So that was it. Marcus, the golden child, the natural businessman, the son who was going to carry the family name, the one who was going to take the company to the next level, had driven the family empire into the ground. And now they were here, in my building, sitting at my table, asking the daughter they threw away to save them. "And the $200,000? I asked. "The money Marcus stole from Mom's account and blamed on me?" My mother flinched. "The police report? The lies you told our family? Our church? The reason I couldn't show my face in Montclair for a decade?" Nobody spoke. "I want to hear you say it," I said. "I want to hear someone at this table say what actually happened." My mother's voice was barely a whisper. "Marcus took the money. We knew. We knew early on, but the dealerships needed capital, and Marcus said it would be easier if everyone thought I did it. Isn't that right? Marcus finally stopped smiling. It was a complicated situation, Eliana. No, Marcus. Stealing $200,000 and framing your sister isn't complicated. It's criminal. The door opened. My attorney, Diane Holbrook, walked in carrying a leather portfolio. She sat beside me and opened it. Mr. and Mrs. Carter. Marcus. My name is Diane Holbrook. I represent Eliana and CLI. Before this conversation continues, I want to present several documents for the record. She laid them on the table, one by one. The first was the original, uncontested version of my grandfather's will, which had eventually been upheld by the court after the challenge was dismissed for lack of evidence. My $500,000 inheritance, which I had finally received in 2021, 4 years late, had been the capital I used to match the VC funding and launch CLI. The second was the dismissed police report, along with a forensic analysis showing that the $200,000 withdrawal had been made using a debit card registered to Marcus's home address. The third was a collection of the doctored screenshots and fabricated emails Marcus had circulated, alongside metadata analysis proving they had been created on Marcus's personal computer. The fourth was a cease and desist letter and a preliminary civil complaint for defamation, fraud, and intentional infliction of emotional distress, naming Marcus Raymond Carter and Denise Williams Carter as defendants. This complaint has not yet been filed, Diane said. Whether it gets filed depends entirely on what happens in this room today. My father's face had gone gray. My mother was crying silently. Marcus was staring at the forensic report like he was reading his own obituary. Before I tell you how this ended, I want you to think about this. 10 years of silence, 10 years of being called a thief, 10 years of being erased from your own family. And now they're sitting across from you, asking for 70% of everything you built from the ashes they created. What would you do? Tell me in the comments. I genuinely want to know. I let the silence sit for a long time. I wanted them to feel it. I wanted them to experience even a fraction of the silence I had lived in for a decade. Then I spoke. Here's what's going to happen. There will be no family partnership. There will be no equity stake. You will not receive a single share of this company. CLI was built with my hands, my mind, my grandfather's belief in me, and the support of people who actually cared whether I lived or died. You contributed nothing. You are owed nothing. My mother reached across the table. Eliana, please. I'm not finished. She pulled her hand back. Marcus, you will sign a written confession acknowledging that you withdrew the $200,000, that you fabricated evidence to frame me, and that you knowingly made false statements to law enforcement and to our family. If you sign, I will not file the civil complaint, and I will not pursue criminal referral for fraud and filing a false police report. If you don't sign, Diane files everything tomorrow morning. Marcus looked at my father. My father looked at the table. For the first time in my life, I watched my father look to Marcus for an answer and find nothing. There was no rescue coming. The golden child had nothing left to give. Mom, Dad, you will issue a written statement to every family member, every friend, and every member of Grace Baptist Church who was told that I stole that money. The statement will make clear that I was innocent, that Marcus was responsible, and that you were aware of the truth and chose to protect him at my expense. My mother was sobbing now. People will judge us, Eliana. I almost couldn't believe she said it. After 10 years of people judging me, based on lies she helped spread, her concern was still about appearances. Still about what other people would think. Still about the surface. Then you'll know how it feels, I said. My father finally spoke. His voice was hoarse. And what about us? The bankruptcy, the house. We're going to lose everything. You already had everything, I said. You had 2 children. You chose one and destroyed the other. You told your daughter to find a husband instead of building her a future. You gave your son a BMW at 14 and told your daughter to take the bus. You moved my college fund into his account. You handed him a career he didn't earn and told me the dealership world wasn't a place for a young woman. That was your decision. Every single one. These are the consequences. I stood up. I loved you. All of you. I loved you so much that I spent 29 years trying to earn something that should have been given freely. I don't hate you, but I will never again let your approval be the measure of my worth. And I will never again shrink myself so that someone else can feel bigger. I walk to the door. Diane will give you 30 minutes to review the documents. You can sign, or you can leave and hear from us through the court. Marcus signed. My mother and father agreed to issue the statement. It was sent to 47 people within the week. The responses were immediate. Aunts and uncles who had refused to speak to me for a decade called in tears. Cousins who had believed Marcus's story sent long, heartfelt apologies. The pastor of Grace Baptist called and asked if I would be willing to come back to the congregation. Women from the church who had whispered about me for years sent messages saying they were sorry, that they should have asked for my side, that they should have known better. I thanked each of them. But I didn't go back, because going back was never the point. It's been a year since that day in Conference Room B. CLI continues to grow. We just closed a Series B round that valued the company at $62 million. I hired 12 new engineers last quarter. I promoted David to Chief of Staff. I endowed a second scholarship in my grandfather's name. I also got married. His name is Nathan. He's a pediatric surgeon who I met at a charity gala in Philadelphia. He knows everything. Every scar, every silent dinner, every birthday I spent alone. And he loves me not in spite of those things, but because of who they made me. On our wedding day, he looked at me and said, "You are the strongest person I have ever known." And for the first time in my life, I believed it when someone said it. My grandfather's lakefront house was eventually sold to cover my parents' debts. I bought it at auction. I didn't buy it for revenge. I bought it because it's the place where I was first loved honestly, where an old man sat with me on a wooden dock and said, "Eliana, you've got fire in you. Don't let anyone put it out." I sit on that dock now, sometimes in the early morning, when the lake is still and the world hasn't started making noise yet, and I think about all the years I spent trying to earn a seat at a table that was never built for me, a table where the son sat at the head and the daughter sat in the kitchen, a table where my achievements were inconveniences and my ambitions were threats. Here's what I've learned, and I want you to hear this, especially if you're living in the version of this story where you're still in the studio apartment, where you're still in the silence, where you're still wondering if you're the problem, where you're still being told to be less so someone else can be more. You are not the problem. Some families have a system, and the system requires a scapegoat. It requires someone to carry the blame so that the golden child can carry the crown. And if you were chosen for that role, it was never because you were less worthy. It was because you were strong enough to survive it. They knew that. On some level, they always knew that. That's why they chose you and not him. Because they knew he couldn't handle what you could carry. Your worth is not determined by the people who refused to see it. Your future is not limited by the people who tried to take it from you. And your healing does not require their permission, their apology, or their understanding. Build your own table. Set your own standards. Love the people who show up for you. Not with words, but with presence, with consistency, with truth. And if the people who hurt you ever come back, not with humility and accountability, but with their hands out, expecting you to save them from the consequences of their own choices, you are allowed to say no. You are allowed to close the door. You are allowed to protect the life you built from the people who tried to make sure you'd never build anything at all. My name is Eliana Carter. I'm 41 years old, and I am no longer waiting to be chosen. I chose myself. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you that your pain doesn't have to be your ending, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. And remember, your silence is not weakness. Sometimes, your silence is the seed of everything that's coming next. Thank you for listening. I'll see you in the next one.